Paul Keating, as he likes to do, has lobbed a hand grenade into the national defence debate, repeating his tired old anti-American rhetoric, even suggesting Australian teenage soldiers could die on the beaches of Taiwan in a conflict with China.
It'll get resolved socially and politically over time. That's what will happen there. But the thing is, it's not our matter. I mean, does anyone want their kids to be shot to death on a sandy beach in Taiwan? Australian kids shot to death on a sandy beach in Taiwan? This is the outcome of such a policy.
How ridiculous. Now, no one thinks that's going to happen apart from Paul Keating. But of course, his favourite outlet, the ABC, is always happy to give him oxygen, give him a platform. His comments come, by the way, during a week when ASIO raised the terror threat level in Australia from possible to probable. But for all the talk and money thrown around, is there an actual plan, a strategy in place to keep Australians safe from foreign invasion or from terror at home? New research from the Institute of Public Affairs and Strategic Analysis Australia, who we talk to on a regular basis, says no, arguing that the country is dramatically underprepared for the possibility of conflict in our region. For more, I'm joined by IPA Executive Director Scott Hargrave. Scott, thanks for your time. Look, it was announced this week that more US fighter and surveillance aircraft are going to operate from the top end, more Marines, in order to deter Chinese aggression. What did you make there of the Keating assessment of our alliance with the Americans?
Well, as you said, it's terrible. If that was, it's not so much a hand grenade as a wet lettuce, but what we've said in this report, along with Peter Jennings and Michael Shoebridge, your frequent guests, is the time for action is now. There's a realisation that we don't have, as we used to have, say, 10 years warning of conflict in our region. That planning horizon doesn't exist. It's actually about the next term of government is the time frame in which both major parties in Canberra need to take action in a dramatic way. We've got some recommendations because we've got this absolute frozen sort of decision-making process. And people like Paul Keating need to be called out for nonsensical things like that. In that interview, by the way, I should mention that he said that Taiwan was to China what Tasmania is to Australia. That is just completely ahistorical nonsense, and it just happens to be a CCP talking point. This idea that Australia would be uninvolved in any conflict in the Asia-Pacific region involving Taiwan, ignores the relationships with not just Taiwan, but with our trading partners like Japan and South Korea, not to mention, of course, the US alliance. So there's many, many things we can say about Paul Keating's approach, but it must be resolutely rejected by the Australian people if we're to start taking action now.
Yeah, we won't dwell on him, Scott, because he is an irrelevance now, and I want to get onto your report. But, I mean, scaring people by suggesting young Australian men are going to be shot on the beaches of Taiwan, I mean, that's ridiculous.
It is, and the focus of our report, and really the focus of most of the serious thinking, is actually not about the prospect of expeditionary forces. It's about the defence of our own continent, the defence of our northern approaches, the islands to the north, like the AUKUS Islands, Christmas Island, even Norfolk Island in the Pacific, our own backyard in the Pacific. How are we protecting these regions? How are we enmeshing ourselves with our Pacific Island neighbours and rebutting the Chinese attempts to insinuate their ways into there? These are some of the recommendations in our report: hardening and strengthening Northern Australia, our islands, and working more closely with our neighbours and friends.
Get onto the hardware question in a moment. I want you to explain to me, if you can, because I know at the heart of this report is this suggestion that defence and politicians have to stop being led by these idea that you plan 10 years ahead, 5 years ahead even, that we've got to, in the climate that we're currently in Australia and the world, have some immediate thinking and do some immediate things.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Steve. This is not a new notion even in Canberra, and from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, has said as much. And in the early term of the Albanese government, there was perhaps a hope that we'd see a reversal of the drift even that they'd inherited from the last Morrison government. But apart from AUKUS, for all the talk, there is no action. If anything, funding programs have been cut to try and prop up the AUKUS program at a time when there really needs to be actual money spent, things ordered to cut swathes through the bureaucracy, to shorten the decision-making timeframes. So there is some recognition that we need to take action in the near term, but it's just not happening. So that's why our blueprint is very squarely directed at the term of the next government, things we can do right now.
I've got great regard for Jennings and Shoebridge, as I know you have, and Michael and Peter are both regulars on this program. The last defence announcement I can remember involved some announcement about drones, but they were not to be armed. They were unarmed drones to be used as spy drones. That doesn't seem to be all that aggressively defending our island nation to me.
No. Drones and missiles are two great examples where there seems to be endless discussions about systems that we just don't seem to be getting any of. If there's one lesson we've learned out of Ukraine, is that you need to deploy vast amounts of material in a short space of time, ramp up production. And the way they've approached it in Ukraine is not to set up government working parties to work out what's the best possible drone. It's actually just to work with the suppliers that you have, and we have great suppliers in Australia, and actually start ordering some of these weapons. And of course, and we're behind the game now because there's a worldwide shortage of missiles and drones because of the conflict around the world. But yeah, we've got to cut through this Canberra decision-making process. Otherwise, we'll never get anything.
Our government's just fundamentally lazy about this because they know they've got the ANZUS Treaty to back them up. They can ramp up the number of marine rotations in the north, where I think we're expanding the air bases in the territory and parts of WA to take B-52 bombers and the like. Do we just sort of sit back and go, well, we've got the best insurance policy we could ever have for our house. If it ever comes that we need to use it, we've got it?
Steve, isn't that a terrible thought? So we've got 6 recommendations in what is the first of 6 papers. And one of them does say we certainly should be inviting the Americans to increase the rotation of their Marines, in fact, expand the overall size to something more like 16,000. But Australians don't want to be bludgers. We don't want to be getting our defence on the cheap simply by inviting the Americans in. It's about what we need to do as a nation to prove that we're fair dinkum about our own defence. If we're going to harden and strengthen our defence assets in Northern Australia, in the island approaches, to be able to work with our Pacific Island neighbours, to be able to bring Japan into the ANZUS framework, which is something else we're doing, we need to start showing that we're serious. So the US alliance is great. Certainly, we do support measures that help us work with our US friends, but seriously, it's about what we do and the platforms we procure right now.
Scott, great work. I look forward to reading the report at some length. Thank you very much for your time.